Next thing I know, he's ripping apart a story of mine. Then he has the gall to tell me that he has lost his wallet.
That wallet's been lost for over 20 years.
Now, mind you, that story was the most remarkable story I'd ever read. I knew I was going to marry the woman who wrote it. I was going to hunt her down and make her marry me. To our suffering, my dear.
There's not enough scotch in the world for that one.
And that's a clip from Shirley. I'm delighted to say Elisabeth Moss joins us. I don't know where. I need to check this out before we start. But hello, Elisabeth Moss. How are you?
Hi, I'm very good. How are you today?
Okay. Where do we find you?
I am in Toronto, Canada, where I am shooting season 4 of The Handmaid's Tale.
Yeah. How's that going then?
It's going really well, actually. It's been really, really great. Obviously it's incredible to be back at work, and we're all experiencing how nice that is after all that time off. And, we have an incredible crew who's doing an amazing job and following all our protocols. And, knock on wood, we're keeping everyone safe, and it's so far so good.
Can I just ask you about working now? Because last night I was watching TV and I was watching the West Wing special, the one-off, which is featuring you. In fact, I'm just sort of concentrating on something else. And then suddenly Elisabeth Moss appears on my television telling me to go and vote and talking about being Zoe Bartlett and so on, and it's great. And I'm a West Wing nut and I absolutely loved it and thought it was terrific.
Great.
And then right at the end, it's explained how it's done with all the distancing that's needed. And in the credits at the end, it's got like COVID secretary, COVID security. And it just struck me that so here you are going back on The Handmaid's Tale doing season 4, but does it feel really different, the fact that you've got all these extra levels of staffing and insurance and safety that's required now?
Um, you know, uh, it is it is different, but I think we got used to it so quickly. And, in some ways it actually feels safer than we had before. It feels like we're being extra careful and cautious to keep everybody healthy, and we've been doing less hours during the day, and with the sole purpose of keeping people rested and trying to help them not get sick. And it's costly to do that, but we've been lucky enough to get the support from MGM to do that. And, so there's some things that actually feel almost better in a way, like we're taking better care of our crew. But I also think that people are very willing to do what they have to do to keep people safe, not only out of the decency of their own hearts, but the fact that we want to be back at work, and everyone, there are people that need a paycheck, and there are people that need to support themselves and their families. So it's a small sacrifice to make, to kind of wear a mask and
Yes.
a shield and wash your hands, if it means you get to do that. So I think that, yes, it's been different, it's been challenging, but it hasn't been something that's been ugly to do.
Yes. So at the start of our conversation, we had a little clip from Shirley. The Shirley in question is Shirley Jackson, is played by you. This is often, I've seen this described as an anti-biopic. In fact, that might even be a quote from you. So tell us about Shirley and Shirley Jackson and how you got involved in this story, Elisabeth.
Yeah, so I was sent this script, and when I was first sent it, it was actually, there was an offer out to another actress, a wonderful actress who I very much respect. And I thought, well, if she gets the part, or she says yes, then that's great. She's going to be incredible. And if she doesn't, then I get to be the lucky person who does it. And luckily, she did say no, and I got the call, which was very, very, very exciting. And they asked me to be a producer on the film as well, so I got to be involved in that capacity too, which was really great. And then I just sort of dived in, reading all of Shirley's work and working with Michael on reading all of her letters and the letters between them, reading any biography I could get my hands on, and truly just tried to kind of find out as much as I could about her, and then also work on creating her physicality and, the accent and all of that.
My introduction to Shirley Jackson prior to watching your film comes from the critic who's on our show, Mark Kermode. He has a doctorate in horror fiction, and so therefore knows everything about Shirley Jackson. And he insisted that I read the first few pages of The Haunting of Hill House before I even get anywhere near your film, just so that I've got an interesting kind of, just a sense of the kind of brilliant writer that she was. So,
Mhm.
having done all the prep, how would you describe the writing of Shirley Jackson to someone who, like me, until a few days ago, didn't really know much about Shirley Jackson?
Yeah, it's very difficult because she actually wrote such a breadth of work that it's very hard to put her in a box. You know, The Haunting of Hill House is one of her most famous works, which is obviously something that could be, it's a scary story or a horror. Then there's something like The Lottery, which is almost more like, it's this sort of allegory, and it's almost more in line with sort of Margaret Atwood's work. And then she also, though we didn't include this in our story, she wrote wonderful pieces about family and homemaking, and so there's it's very difficult to put her in any box. The only thing I could say is that she was far ahead of her time. She was doing work that inspired many authors, and she was incredibly intelligent and very deeply funny. I think that's something that, it's sometimes very darkly funny, but I
Mhm.
think that's something that is missed. There is not the first thing that is commented upon when you talk about her work, but she had a very good sense of humor herself. Her husband Stanley did as well, and you can definitely see that in her work in the same way that you can see that in Margaret Atwood's work. There's a very dark, very smart sense of humor.
I love the quote. I think it was in the New York Times review of your film, Elizabeth, where they talk about Stanley as a prancing intellectual hobbit. What do you make of that? What do you make of that?
I think that's like that sounds like something I want to have. I'm like, oh, that sounds adorable.
Thanks. Yes, have one delivered to me right this afternoon.
Yes,
So,
please.
as we join the film, what state is Shirley Jackson in?
Well, in our sort of highly fictionalized version, we've kind of messed with the timeline a little bit of things. But in our story, The Lottery has just come out, and she is dealing with the sort of aftermath of that, which brought her quite a bit of fame and infamy, and was quite crippling in a way, as any sort of big first success is. The sophomore effort's really difficult. And she's having trouble leaving the house, and she's having trouble dealing with the fact that she's actually just really become quite famous and loving it. And it's very flattering, but can be tricky. So she's embarking on writing another one of her, a novella called Hangs a Man. So we mess with the timeline a bit. That's not exactly how things went. But for the purposes of the book that was written that this is based on, that's the way it
Yes.
went.
So into this situation in Shirley and Stanley's house arrive Fred and Rosie. So just there, and in retrospect, they feel like a fairy tale couple who wander into your lair. So explain the relationship that you and your husband have with Fred and Rose.
Yeah, I think what that device obviously is it's difficult to tell a story without having a perspective or point of view of somebody outside that couple. And I love that device. It allows us to actually see Shirley from Rose's point of view, and to really kind of look at what it would be like to observe that woman at that time. Yeah, so Rose and Fred arrive, and they are these sort of lambs that kind of, yes, wander into this slaughter. Um,
Yes.
and it allows as well, which I thought was really smart that the author of the book did, was as it allows Shirley to have a journey as well. It allows her to kind of have this journey through Rose and this arc in that story as she kind of becomes, as at first they're enemies, and then they become friends, and then they become almost lovers, and it allows both of them to have, I think, a richer arc.
Yeah, and there's a moment, I think in the first half, where Shirley says to young Rose, "I'm a witch. Did you know that?" And part of us wants to kind of go along with that, that maybe she is.
Of course, and I think that, Shirley, obviously, you can see it in her. She was interested in tarot cards. She was interested in witchcraft. It's the other great thing about having a character like Rose kind of enter the story is that it's actually quite it's not very interesting to watch a writer. I mean, they sit and they write, or they sit and they think about what they're going to write. It wouldn't make a very interesting film.
No, the line is a little bit dodgy and squelchy in places, but I will persist as though nothing has happened. You were talking about being a producer on this, Elizabeth, and I imagine that you're a very hands-on producer involved in the casting and so on. Is that kind of integral to the way you want to do movies really now?
Yeah, it definitely is. It's something that has almost not, wasn't necessarily sort of a big intention of mine to become somebody who is a producer on all of the things that I do. It kind of just happened. And then when it started to happen, I found it incredibly fulfilling and interesting and artistic and creative. And so now it's just become something that is kind of par for the course. It's very rare that I do things that I'm not a producer on now. Part of the reason as well is not only do I enjoy it and I find it very fulfilling, but one of the reasons why I encourage other actresses, especially young actresses, to pursue that path is, you're doing a film and they're selling this movie based on the fact that you're in it sometimes, and to have that bit of control, to have a bit of say, to have some, be able to help to tell the story in every way possible, I think is a kind of wonderful thing. And it's something that is hard, honestly, very difficult for me not to do now.
When Margot Robbie was on for I, Tonya, she was talking about, I mean, obviously she starred in it as well, but she was a producer on the film. And she was talking about being so hands-on, she was, checking the box office take in Iceland. Are you that hands-on?
I well, I mean, I'm extremely hands-on. I'm not sure that the box office return in Iceland is something that I've necessarily checked, I have to say.
No,
But
it's not huge. It's not huge.
it's a good tip. It's a good tip. I'm sort of a producer that, yes, is involved from the very beginning,
Yes.
from the script to that film landing in theaters, or that show landing on the network or the streaming service. From the very beginning, I kind of said I don't want to be just I don't want it to just be a title or a vanity title or something, which I know is fine for some people, but for me, there's no point unless I'm actually really doing the job and I enjoy the job.
When Gemma Arterton was on the show a couple of months ago, and she'd just done Summerland, and she was talking about working on a largely female-skewed team, and how delightful the whole experience had been. And I wonder, because I think the same's pretty much the team that you have on this movie. What difference does it make to you on set? Does it just feel completely different?
I go back and forth honestly on this question because there are and I think I go back and forth because there's no real general answer for it. Everyone's different. You can work with women that are, terrible. And that you could work with a woman who's just not good at her job. You could work with a man that's just not good at their job. And so I go back and forth on it because, for example, then I land on something that has an entirely female team, female director, female DP, female producers, female writer, whatever it is, and I find it to be an incredibly easy and wonderful experience. And so then I go, you know what? I think it is better with women. So I really go back and forth on it. But I do think that ultimately women, when they work together, have an incredible way of communicating. And I think that there are, as a producer, as a female producer, I do deal with this all the time. Managing the male ego is a very it's a difficult task that we've dealt with for a long time. And it's kind of nice when you don't have to do that.
Elizabeth, thank you very much indeed for speaking to us. I'll let you get back to The Handmaid's Tale. What do we see you in next? I mean, obviously, Handmaids is going to take you some time, particularly things are slowing down a lot. But after that, do you know what you're up to then?
Yeah, I guess, I mean, I have a couple of films coming out, but the way that things are going, I suppose we don't know when they are coming out, right? I mean, I've got the Wes Anderson film, The French Dispatch, and then I've got a film with Taika Waititi that's going to come out at some point, but I don't believe we have release dates, or new
Yes.
release dates, I should say, on those. So it's quite likely that Handmaids, although we don't have a premiere date yet, I would say it's almost likely that Handmaids is the first thing you may see.
All right. Well, we'll look forward to that. Elizabeth Moss, thank you so much for talking to us. We appreciate that.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.